Welcome to Adventures in Surgical Weight Loss with Dr. R. I'm Dr. Richard Rasmussen. I'm a bariatric surgeon and excited to bring you another story from a surgical weight loss patient. My goal is to give patients a place where they can share their amazing stories. I get to hear these stories all the time. I hope through this process to get rid of some of the bad information that exists about surgical weight loss.
Today I'm going to share some information that I often share with patients to help them understand food and how it interacts in the body to help them in their weight loss journey. Okay, in the body when we eat food, it causes lots of different reactions, but one of the reactions it causes is it stimulates the pancreas to secrete insulin. So the pancreas, a little organ, sits in the body. And when we eat particularly sugary foods, the insulin level in the body and the blood goes up as a direct result. And what insulin does is one of its many functions is to cause fat deposition. So it causes fat to go into the cells. So when we're trying to lose weight, we really want to focus on keeping insulin levels low. So, for example, intermittent fasting, that's how that works. You have a longer period of time when you're not eating, so you're not stimulating the pancreas, so those insulin levels are lower. And we can also manipulate that by how we think about food. So, in somebody who is a recent post-op patient or even long-term post-op patient, this is how I want them to think about food. So, first of all, we have proteins and fats. Particularly in the early postoperative period, we really have to focus on protein. The volumes are so small that they're consuming that if they don't get enough protein, the body's just going to eat up their own muscles. Of the three macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbohydrates, protein is the one macronutrient that your body cannot produce. Your body can produce fat, your body can produce carbohydrates, but it can't produce protein. So we have to supply that. Now, when it comes to the pancreas and insulin secretion, protein causes a little bit of insulin secretion, but not a lot. I include fats with proteins for a couple of reasons. One, in nature, you rarely find protein without fat, so they usually come combined. Secondly, fats are the one macronutrient that don't stimulate any insulin secretion. So from an insulin standpoint, fats aren't a big deal. Now, we can talk about the amount of calories per gram of fat, and that gets us into a whole different discussion. But focusing specifically on insulin and what it's doing in our body, if we're consuming fats, it's not stimulating the pancreas to secrete insulin. So I combine those, so you really don't need to worry about it. You want to eat, of course, good, healthy proteins with healthy fats in them. But for now, we'll just say that proteins and fats are the primary thing you need to focus on when you're eating. Secondly is veggies. Veggies are technically a carbohydrate, but they have a very, very low carbohydrate content in them. And they have a lot of fiber, a lot of water typically, and a ton of micronutrients. So eating vegetables is very good for our body. And I usually encourage a wide variety of vegetables, lots of colors, textures. You want a lot of different vegetables. And for most people during the weight loss phase, this is really where I want them to live. I want you to have proteins, good healthy vegetables, and that's it. That's really where you're living. Fruits, also carbohydrate, more sugar content than vegetables, but eaten as a whole fruit, your body typically is able to take care of that pretty well. As a whole fruit, it comes packed with fiber. Fiber blunts the insulin response, and that's much better than juicing the fruit. So, for example, if you take a juice, you've taken all the fiber out, and so basically, you're just drinking sugar, and it's going to cause a really significant insulin spike. So fruit can be used as a very good tool in weight loss and weight maintenance, and it's best used as the whole fruit. For my postoperative patients, I usually recommend waiting on adding the fruit until later. And there's a couple reasons for that. In a post-op surgical patient, the volume of the stomach is very small. And so if the patient is eating fruit, they're replacing something else. I've already described why we don't want to replace the protein. And if they're replacing the veggies with the fruit, there is going to be more of an insulin spike with that. And during that especially that honeymoon period where we're really trying to lose a lot of weight, we want to maximize that. So I recommend, again, sticking with protein and veggies initially, and then fruits we can add in later on. Then I draw this line because anything to this side of the line, you can live a completely healthy life without ever eating. So first of all, grains. Now, grains are similar to fruits. It has a high carbohydrate content, but if consumed in a whole form, it has a lot of fiber, which helps blunt that insulin response. However, most of the grains that we have available to us are in a highly processed form. All that fiber's been pulled out, and so it really basically just in your body turns to sugar. You consume grains, pasta, crackers, breads, and it's just going to cause a big insulin spike. And so particularly in a weight loss phase, but even in a maintenance phase, grains should be used very sparingly. Now, we can have a whole other discussion about ancient grains and how those interact, and do you truly have a grain that still has the fiber in it? Is it a cracked wheat, or is it steel cut oats? And what are those responses in an individual? But for the most part, I recommend just avoid it. Now, if you're someone who you've gone through the weight loss phase, you're trying to do maintenance, how do grains fit into my life? A good tool is to use a continuous glucose monitor. You can wear that. You can get it prescribed by your doctor. And then you can see when I eat these types of foods, what happens to my blood sugar. I did that for a while. If I eat a simple white bread, there's a much bigger spike than if I eat a whole grain, seed type of bread. And so you can see, what's that doing in my body specifically. Sugars should be pretty self-explanatory. If you eat sugar, it's going to cause an insulin spike. And then processed foods, those are kind of a double whammy. Most of them have additives in them which can cause insulin spikes. Most of the food additives have not been studied. The ones that have been, a lot of them do cause insulin spikes. And then most of them have added sugar because it's used as a preservative and it's used to improve the taste, particularly things that are labeled as low fat because they took the fat out of them, they lost the taste, they added sugar back in. And particularly in processed foods, sugar comes in a lot of varieties. High fructose corn syrup is a very common one. One of my favorites was a package that was labeled dehydrated cane syrup. So it's basically just sugar. I mean, they're just using their packaging. One thing about processed foods is typically they will come in a package, a bag, a box, something with a barcode. And then because of the added sugar, because of the other ingredients, these are going to be the worst for you in trying to keep insulin levels low to try to help with weight loss.
Why do fats not cause an insulin spike?
The why question. I don't know why they don't. But there's been lots of studies to show that fats don't stimulate the pancreas.
So can you eat fats when you're intermittent fasting if it's just fats? I guess you can't really get them wrong.
Well, right. And, in the body, nothing lives in isolation, right? I mean, so these are principles, and you're right. It's hard to isolate just the fat. And if you're eating just the fat, it's kind of, eating lard, basically, right? And that's not that appetizing. So it usually carries something else with it that's going to cause some insulin secretion. So one of the things we should talk about is that another reason, and I should have mentioned this with processed foods, another reason processed foods are bad is because a lot of them, in addition to the added sugar, they have added fats. And so if you have a situation where you have added sugar and added fats, fats carry a lot of calories per density, and then you add the sugar in, and so you're pushing insulin up, and you have a lot of substrate or calories or fat sitting around. That's a lot more material to push into the cells, and so that's another reason why processed foods are bad. What I'm talking about specifically, so if we take carbohydrates, and if we take protein, and if we take fats, carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram, proteins have 4 calories per gram, and fats have 9 calories per gram. So for the same volume or density of food, you're getting basically twice the number of calories with fats that you do with proteins. It's really in our modern environment where we add the sugar to that scenario where we get the trouble, because then we're really pushing the insulin up.
So from like a calorie standpoint, if you're eating only proteins, fats, and vegetables, should you still be tracking your calories to make sure that your intake isn't more than your output?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I usually like to tell patients is the math never adds up. Okay. So I try to teach principles and understanding. Now, one very good reason to track calories is to understand how many calories are in different foods. Until you've done that at least once or twice, a lot of times people just don't understand. It's like, oh, wow, that has that many calories. But it gets a little nuanced because 1,000 calories of protein and fats are going to work differently in your body than 1,000 calories of sugar. Okay? 1,000 calories of sugar, you're going to push that insulin a lot higher. You're going to have more fat deposition versus 1,000 calories of protein and fat. So even though calorically they're the same. And then there are some foods, and your proteins and veggies are going to fall more in that category, which are considered thermogenic. What that means is your body has to expend energy to break them down. And so just eating them requires some calories just to break them down. And so it kind of gives you more wiggle room, so to speak, on the number of calories your body needs. And so if you think about or talk about, what's my metabolism doing? If I'm eating certain foods, I'm helping my metabolism out. It's gonna rev up more, versus if I'm eating some other foods, it's gonna slow it down and it's not gonna work as well, and I'm gonna hold on to more.
What are your thoughts on carb loading for runners?
Carb loading. So carb loading and carb cycling. So there's two different concepts, right? So if somebody is doing a really low carbohydrate diet, there is good data to show that carb cycling helps keep your metabolism up. So different from what I just said, where you eat a bunch of sugar, it's going to decrease your metabolism. Actually, if you throw sugar in intermittently, and not sugar necessarily, but the simpler carbohydrates, so your fruits and grains, those types of things, if you throw those in intermittently, then it actually helps your metabolism keep at a higher level. So that's a little bit different, carb cycling. And so it's probably a good idea to occasionally carb cycle. And the other advantage it offers is, particularly if you're looking at a lifetime of staying on a diet, most people don't want to give up things completely. And so if you have a time period where I'm going to bring those in and I'm going to eat them occasionally, then that also helps with the kind of the psychological aspects of the deprivation. Oh, I can never have that again type of thought process. So carb loading for runners or other athletes, very well recognized process. Try to build up your glycogen stores so you have enough of those stores to come out during the activity, so you have the energy to compete. What's interesting is there are some athletes who actually train with, I'm pointing at fruits, I meant fats, who train with fats specifically. So they use fats as their energy source rather than carbohydrates. So probably a little more nuanced and detailed than I typically go through with patients. If somebody's really interested in that, hooking up with a trainer who does that regularly is probably a good idea.
If someone, I really like the kind of carb cycling idea, because then it's not so cut out all grains, sugars, processed foods forever. Just have maybe 90-10, 80-20 instead of never touch another grain in your life.
Yeah. And particularly in maintenance, that's what we recommend to patients. I tell them, and you use those numbers I use as well, 80 to 90%. If 80 to 90% of the time you're living here and you deviate over here a little bit, you're going to be fine. You're going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah, and you're not going to stay in an active weight loss phase forever.
Right.
Once you get to your goal maintenance phase, it's a bit different.
Correct.
Hopefully that was helpful in helping you better understand how to think about food, specifically when it comes to weight loss and weight maintenance. Thank you to Savannah Evans for her help in the recording and for asking the questions.
Please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. It will help us reach more people with these amazing stories. I also have a YouTube channel where you can see this video, as well as several other videos about surgical weight loss, general surgery, and robotic surgery. Join us next time for another amazing story.